You're listening to the Cryptid Creature Show. If you're a fan of the show, go and check out our new Patreon site. You'll get access to our private Discord server, exclusive merchandise, access to all live streams and Q&As, discounts on merch from the Cryptid Creature store, and get a chance to be a guest host during one of the show's recordings. Just go to patreon.com/Cryptid Creatures. Thank you for listening and supporting the show.
It was in 2012, and I was a passenger in a car and saw something standing next to a body of water that we were traveling over. I remember when I saw this, and it moved. It had very broad shoulders, was all one color. The first thing that popped into my head was Bigfoot. And I yelled out, I think I just saw Bigfoot as we zoomed past. The driver didn't see it. I didn't think there was such a thing.
This is the Cryptid Creature Show. I am Brian, and with me, as always, my co-host Todd. What's up, buddy?
Brian, tonight our guest is Amy Bue.
Amy Bue.
Amy's a very big Bigfoot researcher in well, everywhere, but she resides in Ohio, I believe.
Yes.
Eastern Ohio.
Been doing it for a while.
Yeah, she's been in it for a while. She's in a lot of documentaries. She's in the BFRO, or was in the BFRO. She's got a long resume of achievements in the Bigfoot world.
She does, so hopefully we're going to talk about all that tonight.
Exactly. And I think she actually saw Bigfoot too. She saw something. She had some kind of encounter, so we're going to talk about that as well. Let's bring Amy on and see what she's got to say. Are you ready?
Yep, let's get her. Hi, Amy.
Guys, hello.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Hey, Amy, thanks for being here with us tonight.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. We met you, I'm trying to remember what conference it was. Do you remember what conference it was that we met you at? Was it
I think it was Indiana.
the first Indiana Bigfoot conference? Right? Yep.
Yeah, I think
That's
so,
right.
yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Down in Nashville, Indiana, right? Said hello, recognize you from all the documentaries and everything you've been in, and got to talk to you a little bit, and I'm glad you came on and are spending some time with us tonight.
Thanks, I'm excited to be here, and I appreciate you asking.
Yeah. So just a little background for the listeners. You've got a lot going on, an extensive resume in the cryptid world, I would say. Co-founder of Project Zoo Book, team member of the Olympic Project Bigfoot Research Team, head of ABLE, Amy's bucket list of expeditions, also a former BFRO investigator, a writer and educator. What made you get into all this? How did you get started in this, and what was it that got you down this path of doing what you're doing?
Well, kind of an accidental Bigfooter. I was never truly interested in the subject. You know, when I was younger, I grew up in the generation with unsolved mysteries and those kinds of things. And I knew of Bigfoot. I mean, who doesn't know about Bigfoot, right? But I didn't think that it was real, had absolutely no clue that so many people said they were seeing something, and just was not aware at the overabundance, really, of possible evidence that was out there. So I just happened to see something. And I always stress that I'm not exactly sure what I saw, but it was in 2012, and I was a passenger in a car and saw something standing next to a body of water that we were traveling over. It was along the shoreline, about 100 yards away, I'd say. So that's the main reason why I'm not, I honestly can't say for sure what I saw. It was too far away. We were in a moving car. But I remember when I saw this, and it moved. It had very broad shoulders, was all one color, that the first thing that popped into my head as we were going over that bridge, as we were going, I was just kind of looking at it, but when we got like parallel to it, the first thing that popped into my head was Bigfoot. That's what it looked like to me. And I yelled out, I think I just saw Bigfoot, as we zoomed past. The driver didn't see it. and immediately thought what a dumb thing that was to say. Like, that's a stupid thing to say. There's no such thing as Bigfoot. So what was that? But that moment, which I live over and over again in my head since that 12 and a half years ago now, I wish I could go back in time and take a better look, and that I would have taken myself seriously enough to try to go back, and all of that. But I didn't think there was such a thing. I didn't know that so many people were seeing these, and that there were footprint evidence and, audio and all of that. But that day, whatever that was that I saw, is what sent me down the rabbit hole of Bigfoot.
Okay, where did this happen at? Where were you at? What state were you guys in?
In Ohio, which was also crazy, right? Because if there were such a thing as Bigfoot, this was what was going through my head at the time, and in the weeks to follow, it certainly wouldn't be in Ohio, but this was in northeastern Ohio, and it was, I was going over Meander Reservoir, which is Youngstown, Ohio's water supply source. It's under the Department of Homeland Security. You can't really go in there or anything. When you drive around it now, and now, of course, I'm always looking at these things, but it's like a wildlife protection spot. But I've never been into that area. You're not allowed in that area, although everybody in town wants to go in there fishing, But it had never occurred to me that people were actually seeing something that could be real, and I just didn't know that all these people said they were seeing it either.
So before this happened in 2012, you really didn't have any interest in Bigfoot?
Not really. I mean, after I saw it, I got a huge interest in Bigfoot, and I started telling my students about it. I'm a teacher, and, watching stuff on TV and reading about it. And I remember the one thing that I exposure maybe to Bigfoot outside of things like In Search Of and Harry and the Hendersons and things like that was when I was a young person myself. I feel old saying young person, but you know what I mean? I can't remember. I think it was in either 8th or 9th grade. I had a teacher who ended up being my favorite teacher ever, who had us write reports about something we weren't sure if we believed in them or not. And I chose the Loch Ness Monster. And I got very interested in that. Still am interested in lake monsters and stuff like that. But to the point where as a junior in high school, I was supposed to go over to Scotland to be an exchange student. So, I was fascinated with that. And I do remember that there was one book in our library that had to do with the Loch Ness Monster, and it did have a chapter, or part of it was about Bigfoot as well. But I didn't even read that part because Bigfoot, that's dumb, right? In my head at the time. But a lake monster, whatever it was, I could kind of get behind. So I guess I always had a natural curiosity about cryptids and things like that, but it didn't extend to Bigfoot at the time. And I never really followed up on the Loch Ness Monster outside of that.
So you said Youngstown, Ohio. We've had a dogman encounter, a very terrifying dogman encounter in Youngstown, Ohio. And you talk about that wildlife preserve and not allowed to go in. There's so many of those throughout the United States. And you do hear about encounters around those areas. And around those areas also are military bases sometimes as well.
Yep. Yeah, the Ravenna Arsenal, that's not far from us, and there's lots of stories there. I know that there is some type of a dogman story in the old steel mills in Youngstown. I never really looked into it, but I know that there's a legend.
Actually, I think that's where they were at when it happened. It was one of them old abandoned.
Yep.
Yeah, I live right near one of those.
Oh, did you? Okay.
I live in Youngstown, and I live right down the street from one of those. So I'm I don't want to see that.
Keep your eye open.
Yeah,
definitely. The only thing that saved him was a train that went right by the steel mill. So.
Wow. Yeah, I know exactly where that is.
Okay. I guess the mill's not there anymore. The building's not there, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. There are some of the mill buildings still up, but probably the one you're talking about is gone.
So talk to us about how you became involved with the Olympic Project.
Oh man, I got lucky. I really did. It's just an organization that I've respected for as long as I knew about it. And I had gone out there when I used to be a BFRO investigator, and I had flown out to Washington to see a friend who happened to be in the Olympic Project. And so we kind of crashed one of their get-togethers, if you want to say that. They were having a little expedition at their headquarters there in the Olympic National Forest, or right outside of it. And they were like, yeah, come on and kind of join. And I didn't really join in so much on the big expedition or anything at the time, but I did kind of get to watch what was going on. And I listened to a couple people that were talking about some things that they were doing. Was always very, kind of starstruck, not starstruck, because not that they're stars, but was very interested in, and very, I admired a lot, I guess is the word I'm looking for, the way they go about their research. Because I am not a scientist. I'm a teacher, but I don't teach science. I am an Ohio certified volunteer naturalist, and I've always loved the outdoors and love anything to do with nature. And although I don't know what Bigfoot is, I've come to the point in my life where I'd say about 98% of the days I finally admit that I think that they exist. For a long time, I called myself a hopeful skeptic, and I still have a day or two like that where I'm like, what if we're just looking for nothing? And what if I'm spending all this time for nothing? But anyway, when I do look at Bigfoot, my interest is, could it be a natural creature, like a living, breathing, breeding, pooping creature out there somewhere? I don't say that that's true. There's a lot of thoughts about Bigfoot, and could it be something else? Sure. It's just that's the avenue that I research and what I'm interested in. And maybe I'll get to the end of it and nothing will come of it. But back to the Olympic Project, that's how they look at it as well. So it really fit into my mindset about this. So I, going there and meeting the people involved, Derek Randall, Shane Corson, Chris Spencer, Rebecca Slick, all of these different people that I really admire, it just kept piling on how much I admired that group. And I never thought that I would be a part of it. I live in Ohio. I still live in Ohio. So it was an awesome experience. I got to go back another time. And then I did kind of join in on one of their little expeditions, and we hiked up an old logging trail, and, we're looking for evidence of Bigfoot in our little tents. It was rainy, like it is often out there. Had a wonderful time, but again, never thought anything. But go forward a few years from when I first, got to go there in person, and then started being friends with some of the group. And out of the blue, I had decided to kind of go on my own. Didn't really want to so much be involved in a group anymore. So I did go out on my own, and then I get a call from Derek and Shane saying, hey, we really would love for you to be a part of the Olympic Project. And it was really, I thought about it for about a day, and then I was like, that's just something I would be honored to be a part of. So I said yes, and since then I've kind of been a Midwestern representative. I go out there as often as possible, but I have my job, and I'm going in January out to Washington and hoping to spend a little bit of time out at the headquarters as well. But we'll see if I get enough days off for that or not. But I do my own research in Pennsylvania and in other states, and then when I'm in Washington, I make sure I go out and help as much as I can.
That's
cool.
awesome. Yeah, we've interviewed a couple of those guys from the Olympic Project. Shane.
They're awesome, and there's a lot of Shane's great. He's such a good friend of mine. He and his wife Summer and their daughter, they're kind of my Washington family when I'm out there.
Nice.
But there's a lot of crossover between the Olympic Project and Project Zoo Book. So quite a few of the people that are in both, not all of it. There's a lot of people that are in the separate ones too, but we kind of have the same goals when it comes to Bigfoot research and the same methodology. So it's a good fit.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So when were you a BFRO investigator? Was that in Ohio as well that you did that?
That was in Ohio, although I did a lot of reports for Pennsylvania. Actually, I mean, I live so close to PA. Oh gosh, what year would that have been? Like maybe 2014, maybe to 2018, around there somewhere. Like I didn't even get interested in Bigfoot till 2012, and it took me about a year before I told anybody outside, like my mom, and friends and stuff, what I had seen and how I was getting interested in all of this. Started talking about it at school and things like that. I didn't think my sighting was interesting enough to report to the BFRO or anything like that, because I wasn't sure what I saw. It wasn't right there. It wasn't a smoking gun sighting. But finally, after about a year, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna report it, because now I know, like, if one person hears something and somebody sees something and somebody smells something, or you find footprints, it all tells a story of the area. So I think it's important. But at the time, I wasn't sure. Maybe it was 2015, I think, maybe, that they invited me to join in the group. So I did. I learned some different things. I got to take some cool reports and make some friends. I still have quite a few friends in the organization. But like I said, just kind of went off and did my own thing.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about the Project Zoo Book. Tell us how you got into that and what that's all about.
Sure. That's my baby. I'm very protective of it, to the point for that where for several years, when it would be brought up kind of in Bigfoot circles and some of the shadier Bigfoot circles and groups out there, maybe I shouldn't say that, but they exist. People would often refer to it as Amy Bue's pretend Bigfoot group because I was fine with that, because I was so protective of the people in it, because I had to be, and I still am, although we have become a lot more vocal about what we do. But basically, I had met over Facebook a young lady who was saying that she was very interested in Bigfoot, wanted to learn more about it. She had a group at her work where they had like a Bigfoot lunch club, that on their lunch breaks, they would all talk about books they were reading or podcasts they had listened to. She had gotten interested because she had gone to the Expedition Bigfoot Museum in Cherry Log, Georgia, with her dad, just kind of going with her dad, okay, Dad, I'll go to that, and became fascinated with it. And she wanted to know more. And so she had gone back to work, and when she and her coworkers were talking one day, she's like, so what do you guys think about Bigfoot? And one of the coworkers had said, hey, I'm really interested in it. I kind of always have been. So they started chatting. Some of the others in their lunch group, who had lunch at the same time, started talking about it too. Well, she had contacted like a Facebook page where they were interested in going on an expedition. And I had noticed that nobody had really answered her. And so I talked to the person in charge of that Facebook page. I'm like, hey, do you care if I answer back? And long story short, it ended up that they couldn't go on the expedition, but I had offered, hey, I was assuming they lived in Ohio, since this was going to be taking place in Ohio, but that wasn't the case. But I had said, hey, we can just go, you don't have to go on an official expedition. You can just like go look for Bigfoot or look for evidence of Bigfoot, right? It doesn't have to be fancy. We're all just kind of out there, doing what we can or what we think might work. And most of the time I'm out there and nothing works. So, it's not rocket science. It's just you're trying your luck. and doing that with some educated guesses, right? Where might something drink? Where could it eat? Where would the best cover be? Anyway, so I had offered to take her and her coworkers out camping. You know, it didn't have to be, you don't have to pay any money. You don't have to do something official. So, long story short on that is that the next week she told me what she and her coworkers did, because I had no clue. We were speaking through Messenger and weren't Facebook friends or anything like that. And it ended up that they were the primate department at a zoo. And when I found that out, I was like, what? What? You know, I was shocked, because at least for me, I didn't have a lot of scientists that took me seriously. You know, we all have Dr. Meldrum and certain scientists that are well known in the field, but for the most part, that at least was not my experience. And so I was a little skeptical at first. I thought, well, maybe they're just having fun, you know, and that's okay. And like, was this something fun to do? And she said, no, like, we're really interested. The more we listen to these podcasts and listen to witnesses, we think that they're talking about things that your average Joe might not know about. That was very primate-like behavior. And the more they delved into it and saw the reports and footprint evidence and everything, they were absolutely fascinated by it. So one thing I know about myself is that I don't know a lot of things. So I'm no expert as far as Bigfoot goes, but I knew enough to connect them to other people that maybe are not experts, but maybe they're experts in the history of it, or, you know, certain ways to research or audio, you know. And so I started taking the network that I had kind of organically built just by making friends with people and being nice to people, you know, and being curious and asking questions. And I was like, hey, I have this group of primatologists and primate zookeepers that are really interested. Do you want to come on a phone call with us? So this started in 2018, just with group phone calls. And then when we heard about and started utilizing Zoom, now we pretty much every other week, sometimes we take a little break. On Thursday nights, we have a Zoom call. And at this point, so you started in 2018 to now, we have a group, not just of those primate specialists, but we have all kinds of different scientists involved, from marine biologists to wildlife biologists, anthropologists, taxonomists, lots of ologists. And we kind of consider ourselves a think tank. You know, we do not have a Bigfoot hiding somewhere that we, you know, are studying or anything like that. But we have different people, usually like different scientists that are hooking up with different researchers working on side projects. So I consider myself the coordinator of the smart people. That's what I call myself. So I'll find out that like these scientists are interested in something similar to these, like here in Virginia, and here's a scientist in Utah, and get them together working on something, or with researchers such as myself. So we have a wonderful time, wonderful conversations. A lot of side projects have come about because of this. And the cool thing is that in 2018, there were very few of the scientists who, I want to say, who were willing to talk about this publicly. And that kind of sounds negative, but it's not, because I get it. You know, they are protective of their reputations, of their jobs. There's not a lot of mercy shown by certain academics when you're interested in a topic like this. So by necessity, they had to be a little private. But till now, we are involved in the new Sasquatch Legend Meets Science documentary that Doug Hychek is doing, that should be coming out like within the next year or so. And several of our scientists went on camera for that. And I just think it's a little safer, maybe, I don't know if that's the right word, probably, for academics to talk about their interest than it used to be. So that makes me really happy. That was a really long answer. Sorry.
Yeah, it seems to be coming more into the mainstream nowadays, which is a good thing.
It is. Yeah.
And we have people like you to thank for that.
Well, thank you. I'm just, like I said, I'm the person coordinating things, but the really cool people are in the background.
So you've been on a lot of other podcasts. You've been on a lot of documentaries, radio shows, you name it. What was your favorite documentary that you did?
Oh, man. There have been some fun things that I've gotten to do. And before I tell you my favorite, and it might depend on the day, which I would say was my favorite, the reason I do them, because sometimes I'm like, man, people must be tired of hearing from me. But the reason that I do it is because you never know who's listening. You all have a different audience. And I am able to put my face out there, whether people want to see it or not, I don't know. But for good or bad, because of the privacy issues in our group, I was kind of like, okay, I'm the designated spokesperson. And we've gotten a lot of scientists joining in for Project Zoobook because of podcasts and things I've done. So I just really appreciate you letting me talk and get my voice out there. But my favorite documentary, probably, like there's been some that I just stumbled into. Like I think for like a minute on A Flash of Beauty, the original A Flash of Beauty, which is a really cool documentary. I think it was so well done, but I just happened to be there.
Yeah.
I was like, I had my camp hair, don't care. I just happened to be camping and with some people that were into Bigfoot, and, it was kind of by accident. One of the creepiest ones I did was out in Stevens County, Washington, Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest. And it was really creepy place. Weird sounds. Just had there's certain places you go that just have a weird vibe, right? And it felt like you were being watched all the time. The northern lights were out, and at first we didn't know what it was, because we weren't expecting that. We're like, is this going to be an alien documentary instead of Bigfoot? But that was cool. But my favorite one, it was like a kind of a mini documentary by Wild Man of the Woods. They have a YouTube channel, and Paul, who is the one that, is kind of the head of that, Paul and Seth, he's a wildlife guy. He's like a hunter and a fisherman, and he does a show about the outdoors industry. And he got interested in Bigfoot and started doing these mini documentaries on Bigfoot. And he contacted me, and I'm like, yes, I want to do it. And so I think hanging around with those guys, getting out into the actual woods and everything with them was a lot of fun. Being involved even just a little bit with Small Town Monsters with some of their documentaries was so cool, because I've known Seth for a long time before he started doing what he was doing, really, and just admire him a lot, and Alec and all them. So yeah, I don't know if I can pick a favorite, but I really do. I would point everybody toward those Wild Men of the Woods YouTube mini documentaries, because they're really well done and a lot of fun and good guys.
Cool. I'm always looking for new good documentaries to check out.
Yeah, me too. We'll definitely check those out.
So who is your favorite colleague in the cryptid field, a favorite investigator to work with?
Oh, you're giving me good questions, but a little bit hard. Let me
rephrase that. Who are some of your favorite?
Okay, that would be better.
Colleague investigators in the cryptid field.
Well, like when it comes to local things, I have a group of really good people in Northeast Ohio. And the surrounding areas that we get together when we can. We've all been pretty busy lately. But Tina Sams, she's my best friend and research partner. And we met through Bigfoot. So she's amazing to have around. We do a lot of outdoor shows together where we get reports from hunters and fishermen. And I love having her there because she is a hunter and a fisherwoman. And so, you know, I like to eat venison and fish and things like that, but I don't really go out and shoot them myself or catch them myself, unless I'm camping. But she's a wonderful person to have on board when you're trying to look for evidence. My friends Monica and Mona, also the ladies, you know, we're out there doing everything, and they've been on a lot of adventures with me. We went out to Montana together. They're just really solid researchers and good people and people I trust. So I love them. Outside of that, I would say Shane Corson, like we were talking about him before, he is just one of my best friends. I think of him as a Bigfoot brother. Very knowledgeable, very kind, very willing to share with other people. One of my favorite things, you know, when I do get out to Washington is to tag along with him when he's like changing batteries on cameras and recorders and things like that. And one time we were there, there's a newer nest site out that the Olympic Project is looking into. And we were just, he and I were out in the woods, you know, you're kind of trekking your way through all these huckleberry bushes and stuff. And he was ahead of me and he turns around, he's like, well, you look like you're happy, because I must have like just had this grin on my face. And I said, this is better than Disney World. Because I was just like, when you're there, you feel like Bigfoot could come around the corner, right? And so he's great. Just, I would say a big part of the reason that I am not as much of a hopeful skeptic anymore and someone who really thinks that these creatures are real has a lot to do with Shane and people like him, because I think about him and how I would trust him with my life. And why would I doubt him? Like, why would I think he's lying? He had an experience where he knows what he was looking at, says they are real. And so I'm like, you know what? I believe Shane, you know, and there's other people like that really influenced me, because like I said, I've never had that absolute experience. Another person who I just love going out researching with is Kevin Alexejek. I'm sorry, Kevin, if I said your name wrong, but he's an amazing researcher. He's from Pennsylvania. He's an engineer, very logical thinker. If I was sending somebody that, I don't ever try to convince people that Bigfoot is real, but if I was trying to convince people that Bigfoot was real, he's who I would send them to go have coffee with, because the way that he explains things is very logical, but very compelling. And so he's great in the field. There's so many people, so I'm sorry if I didn't say you. I probably forgot to say somebody really important. But there's so many.
I'm sure they understand. So I was looking at those wild man in the woods, and the first one I see is you sitting there talking.
It's really good. I love that way that they do it. The camera work's cool. I love how they came from a totally, you know, they're not Bigfoot people. Nothing wrong with Bigfoot people, right? We love Bigfoot. But they came from this as, outdoorsmen. And, hey, what's going on here? And now they've had some strange experiences themselves, which is cool.
That's how it starts. Curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Friends of mine, Leilani and Carrie Lynn, they are members of the Blackfoot tribe out in Montana. And some of us in Project Zoo Book flew out there. They invited us to camp out on their private property on the reservation, like overlooking Glacier National Park. And they have an amazing YouTube show. It's called Pikuni Bigfoot Tales, I believe, like Pikuni. And they are collecting all of these different stories from the Blackfoot tribe, from members of the Blackfoot Nation. Like stories that were never written down, stories that people are still having to this day. And when we went out there, they took us, like I said, we were camping there. They took us on hikes. We got to talk to different indigenous people who talked about the Inamitapi, which I always feel like I'm butchering that word, but it's their word for hairy man or Bigfoot. and about how they're not just legends and moral tales that they have, but real creatures who they still see often.
So you said earlier you didn't really feel like you had an absolute experience, but I think you did. You say the creature was about 100 yards away. And when people hear that, they're like, oh my gosh, that's far away, that 100 yards. 100 yards is not that far.
It's not. The more I think about it, I can't go back in time or anything. And I think the more people that I talk to and they second guess themselves and they're like, it couldn't be that. I think there's a lot of that going on. And there was at the time for me. Like I always say, I don't want to talk myself into something. I don't want to fool myself. But it wasn't long after I started digging into the whole Bigfoot thing that I found out I wasn't the only one that saw it there. And I've talked to people myself. I've taken reports myself where people have seen them right around there, right in the same area. I talked to a young man who was hunting and saw one running across the field close to where I saw one. I talked to a lady who saw one with a duck in its mouth just over the fence, like down in kind of a boggy area. A gentleman who saw one with a dead deer it was carrying under its one arm. So I just, in good faith can't say 100% that's what I saw, but do I think it was? I kind of do. I kind of think it was, which is cool. But there are a lot of sightings around that area, and I've had weird experiences. I saw something walking down a power line cut in 2018, and there was another witness, and we watched it through a FLIR at night, walk down this power line cut. And when we sent Kevin, who I was talking about earlier, down to where it had been standing at first, he looked dwarfed by it, and he's 6'9". So that was the time I almost fainted. For real, like I was like, oh, I had to grab onto someone. So that was cool. And I had a really weird experience in the Allegheny National Forest. The night before, we had, of all people, we had a journalist from the Wall Street Journal coming out to interview us and go looking for Bigfoot evidence with us, and a photographer. And the night before, when we weren't getting anything, out because we were thinking about the next day, myself and couple other people had a weird experience with what we felt and heard. Didn't see anything though, but I've had creepy things happen for sure.
Well, I'm not letting you off the hook yet on this 100-yard thing.
Sure. Okay, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I do this all the time. Go ahead.
I'm going to take you back into this real quick. Do you golf?
Do not.
Have you ever been on a golf course on a golf cart?
Of course, yes.
Okay. Most people have. And you talk about 100 yards, and people automatically think, 100 yards is far, because they sit in these big football fields, and they're way up high, and they're thinking, oh, my gosh.
It's really not that far.
But when you're on a golf course, and you're 100 yards out, and you want to use your pitching wedge or your sand wedge to hit on the green, and there's guys on the green putting, you can almost make out these guys' faces, and you can tell exactly what they are. They're human beings.
Oh, yeah. I know it was not a bear. I know that it was not a bear. The stance and everything. The only way it could have been a human being is if they were dressed as Bigfoot. And that just, like, when I say that out loud, it sounds so stupid. Like if they had like some big things to make their shoulders bigger. And so, no, I agree with you. It just sounds so improbable. And I know, like, if I was even in a football field, if I was standing in an end zone, I would be able to tell if it was a human on the other end zone or a deer or whatever. What I saw going down the power line cut, we were looking around with the FLIR after it went, and we saw deer and people, and they were totally different than what we saw. So, no, I agree with you that it really isn't that far. We were in a moving car at the same time, so I just am being honest about that. But do I think that it was? I do. I do think that it was. I just don't know that it was, I guess, is what I should say.
Well, nobody really knows.
True.
Do they? They're pretty much sure to a point. But like you said, there was other sightings around that area. So you have to say it honestly. And that was a question I was going to ask you. Had anyone else reported that? That thing just stood out there and didn't care if cars went by and saw it, because he's like, well, these people aren't going to come after me. They're not going to try to, and if they do, they're not going to find me anyway.
Yeah, they couldn't really. Yeah, it was just, and it stood out so much because, to me anyway, because I've never seen a person in that area, because you're not allowed in there. And I know rangers go in there, and I'm friends with some of the rangers now. And a big reason I became an Ohio certified volunteer naturalist was because of Bigfoot, because you can get into some different areas that you're not normally allowed in, and because I do love nature besides Bigfoot. But yeah, I had never seen a person, so I'm like, what is that? And at that time, I had never heard of black bear coming into that area. Now I know that there are people that see black bears sometimes around this area. But I know it wasn't a bear. That I'd swear to in a court of law. It was not a bear.
So do you think reports are becoming more frequent? You think people are stepping forward more these days because the population is growing on both sides, or do you think that? Why do you think that is?
I think personally a big part of it is, whatever you think about TV shows with Bigfoot, whether you think they're dumb, whether you like them, whether you enjoy them for entertainment value, whether you think they're true, I think those have made it easier for your normal person to come out and say, well, I had an experience, because it's not as taboo as it used to be. So I think that part of it is a good thing. It gets a conversation going where people say that. When we do the outdoor shows that we do, people will refer to things that have happened, in the past. And so the more exposure, whether it's a Bigfoot person like myself there, like maybe they wouldn't have talked about it if somebody like myself, it doesn't have to be me, wasn't there to talk to, and they start thinking, So I think in our culture, Bigfoot's kind of popular. I think we would agree. You can buy Bigfoot t-shirts everywhere and stuff. I don't think, like some people do, that means all of a sudden everybody's making up stories. I do think sometimes I know sometimes people make up stories. I know some pretty well-known Bigfooters who are hoaxers, so I know that happens. But I also think bringing it into, being a topic that people can talk about, you're going to hear the stories that you didn't hear of before.
Why do you think there's people that just can't accept that there's a possibility that these things exist when you have all this, like you said, there's Bigfoot everywhere, Bigfoot on t-shirts, Bigfoot on keychains, whether people believe or not, they buy this stuff as a joke or whatever, they're into it. It's becoming more popular, isn't it? Isn't Bigfoot becoming more popular?
Oh, for sure.
Why do you think it's so hard for people to believe that these things can exist way deep in the forest? And maybe they have some kind of magical powers that help them cloak or hide in caves.
Who knows?
They can go through portals. Who knows? Nobody knows, but why do you think it is so hard for people to want to believe that they're real?
I think I've made this analogy often, and I believe it's true, that to a big part of the population, when you say, I'm really interested in Bigfoot, and, I go looking for evidence of Bigfoot, they look at you like you are looking for Smurfs or something like that. Like they see no difference between the two. And they really don't. And I think that the reason is because they've never really looked into it. I will say to a person, we've never had a scientist come on a Project Zoo Book call or Zoom that has not left saying, I had no idea that this was going on. They didn't know that there were so many very believable reports, and they didn't know about the footprint evidence, and they didn't know about the audio that has been captured or the history of it besides like Harry and the Hendersons and things like that. They just never really looked into it. And so when somebody just sees it as, something in popular culture and a joke, they stop there and they're like, oh, whatever. And they don't look into it. So I don't take offense if somebody makes fun of me. I just really think that they just don't have a clue. And that's okay. They don't have to have a clue. I try not to take it personally. Does it irritate me a little bit if they're arrogant about it? Yeah, because I might not be the world's smartest person, but I'm also not stupid. And so all of us who are very interested in this are not just some big idiots out there. There are very bright people who think that there is legitimacy to this. So does it irritate me a bit? Yes, but that might be my ego a little bit getting mixed up in there. And I try to just be like, whatever, they don't have to be interested if they don't want to be.
I think you're right. You kind of hit the nail on the head. It's a lack of information or interest. And yeah. I have a couple friends that are skeptics or non-believers, and they laugh at me. And
so do I.
But I've shown them a couple things, and I've got them interested enough to check out a couple things, and they'll maybe ask a question here or there, and then they see this, and it's like you can tell they're confused. You know what I mean? So whether they keep going with it, I'll say this much: if any non-believer or skeptic could know all the things, watch all the things and read all the things and see all the things that Brian and I and you, for that example, have seen, I guarantee you they would not be.
I agree. I agree. I think they just don't know. And some of our scientists that are in Zoo Book, a lot of them are skeptics and hopeful skeptics. They want it to be real, but they're not sure. And then we have different scientists that have seen one or experienced things. And, I'm thinking of one of our scientists who he acknowledges he used to make fun of people. He had a good friend that he worked with that believed that Bigfoot was real. And he's like, oh, come on, you're smarter than that. He did that whole thing. And now he had to eat his words and apologize to the guy because he was out looking for something else. And guess what? He saw one. So I just think they just don't know better.
I've always said that since we started this, that there's just certain people that don't want to know.
Yeah.
They don't want to know. They want to live in their little bubble, and, we're the only people on this planet, and they don't want to know anymore. No matter how much you try and convince them, no matter what they read, no matter what they watch, they're not gonna accept it. I pretty
much learned that pretty quickly, that I'm just not trying to convince people. If you want to listen to me or whatever, I'll tell you why I think.
Right.
And then you make up your own mind. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're at too.
Yeah.
Well, the only way those people are going to truly believe is if the government tells us they're reil. And that's not
or one steps out of the woods right in front of their face.
Right.
Yeah, they get the
right.
And that's
right. If something happens to them. No, you're right.
Right.
Do you think the proof of Bigfoot will ever happen, be announced to the public in the future at any time?
Well, you never know, right? Look at UFOs, right? UAPs and everything.
Kind of backtracking on that now too, so.
Right? So for so long, that's ridiculous. And it's funny because we named ourselves Project Zoo Book, kind of in honor of Project Blue Book, although we're not comparing ourselves to the how big that project was. We did it kind of as a joke because, you're talking about aliens and stuff and how they had to be kind of secretive. And we were like, well, we can't really come out of the Bigfoot closet either. So somebody suggested Project Zoo Book since we had the zoologists and stuff. But truly, who would have thought that the Pentagon and everybody was going to start saying, yeah, we do have records of these flying, whatever they are. So I think it could happen. Whether or not the government knows everything about Bigfoot, I don't know. I never used to be a conspiracy theorist at all. Pretty naive about things and stuff. Now I've come to accept that there are a lot of things that the government doesn't tell us about and that they know of. But as far as Bigfoot, I'm just not sure how much, on one side, absolutely, they could know everything there is to know and be covering it up. Absolutely, they could be. On the other side, I think of the people that work in the government as humans, fallible humans. And I'm like, well, how good of a job would they do on that? So I go back and forth, but I will tell you another story if you want to hear it about another one of our scientists that joined Zoo Book pretty early on. She is a marine biologist, and she reached out to me because I had been on a podcast. See? And she's like, hey, I know I work with fish and stuff, but I'm really interested in Bigfoot. Would you, be willing to have me on? I'm like, yes, please come on. But long story short, for her, she and some other wildlife biologists had seen a mountain lion where it was not supposed to exist, where they were not supposed to live. And they had talked to like Fish and Game or, somebody in charge about this mountain lion being there. And the guy kept saying, you're mistaken. There's no mountain lions around here. And she really got kind of upset because she knew what she had seen. There were either 3 or 4 other wildlife biologists with all this experience. They knew what they had seen and were being told they had not seen it. And it really irritated her. And after much discussion and him admitting that, maybe really did see something, but we don't have the money or funding to look into that, he kind of sent her down the path to going down her own rabbit hole about what are other people seeing that they're being told they didn't see. So there's all kinds of reasons that the government could not want us to know about Bigfoot. And I think it's definitely going to take a body. We are a no-kill group. I just can't help but thinking, what if we shoot the last Bigfoot? I don't know. I just can't stand behind that, especially because we don't know exactly what they are. But I think it's going to take, a body to be sure. Unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're right.
Yeah. And there's a big part of me, even though I'm in this group with all these scientists and I want to know if they're real, there's a huge part of me that hopes that we never know, like that they just stay hidden. Yeah. Our goal is that if, that it comes out that they're real, that we would have something to offer the powers that be to help protect them.
Protect them, yeah.
That's why we do what we do.
Besides the 8-foot tall, hairy, ape-looking like creature, what's your definition of Bigfoot?
Oh,
what do you?
I love this whole interview. You're making me think.
What do you think these things really are?
I hope that they are, like I said, like a living, breathing, earthly creature, whether closer to something like an orangutan. I think when we talk about how intelligent Bigfoot is, I think sometimes we forget how intelligent other large primates are, gorillas, orangutans, all of them, very intelligent. Or if it's closer to human, I don't know. That's what I hope that they are, and I absolutely think they could be. My personal opinion is that a lot of people, on one hand, have weird experiences. That's true. And we shouldn't be afraid to talk about that. And also, I think some people have weird experiences and attribute those weird experiences to Bigfoot when I don't see a connection. Sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. But I also think that sometimes people jump from Bigfoot possibly being a natural living creature to something more paranormal because they get impatient. I think about people who have looked for, the cross river gorillas, the billy apes, different subspecies of orangutans for years and their whole lives and never saw one. One of the gorilla guys in our group, his curator had gone over to the Cross River region looking for cross river gorillas before they were like proven to be alive and well. And he lived there for 8 years and he saw one for 10 seconds. And that whole time, and those are gorillas, a subspecies of the very rare gorillas. But I think sometimes it's, we want immediate gratification. I don't expect to ever see a Bigfoot, but I hope to. So again, I talk too much, like a long way around the story, but I hope that they could be something like that, but do I know that that's what they are? No. And I think that there's room for all different kinds of ideas, whether you're somebody who thinks they could be, an alien or something paranormal. Let's all do our own research and come together and compare notes. And I'm okay with being wrong. I admit a bias that I want them to be something like that. I just don't know if I'm right.
Well, nobody really knows. So
That's right. But hopefully someday we will.
Right.
Yeah.
Amy, it was great having you on with us tonight. We really appreciate
Yeah,
being
well,
here.
it was fun.
Thanks, guys. You were fun. I love your questions. You have different questions than a lot of people. I like that.
Thank
You
you.
make me think.
Thank you.
Good.
Keep in touch, and on your next adventure, if you run into anything, or when you do,
Okay.
next again.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll see you at another conference soon.
Oh, I hope so. That'll be fun.
Will you be at Salt Fork
You guys are great.
again this year? The Salt Fork?
I am
conference?
not sure. I haven't been there for many, many years, so I'm not sure if I'm going to make it this year or not. But if I am, are you going to be there?
Yep.
We'll be
probably
at Salt
there.
Fork. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'll let you know if I make it.
All right.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Well, thanks again, Amy.
All right.
You have a good
Thank
night.
you.
All right.
Thanks
Thanks,
so
Amy.
much.
It was fun.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
It was awesome having her on, man. Like talking to her. We should
It
get her
was,
back
yeah,
on.
she was fun. We need to get her on some more.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure she's got a lot more things that she can talk about and tell us about and
Oh, yeah.
experiences that's going on. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was really cool. Appreciate her coming on and talking to us. So,
Yep.
listeners, we appreciate you guys as well. As we always say, thank you so
Always.
much. Be sure to check out our Patreon, Cryptid Creatures. All kinds of good
Yep.
stuff on there. Videos,
Yep.
shorts.
If you have any encounters of your own, shoot us an email or whatever.
Yeah, if you guys have seen something, let us know. You can go on our website, cryptidcreatures.net, or you can email us at info@cryptidcreatures.co. Brian, my friend, I appreciate you too, brother.
Yeah, man. Same here. Always fun, man. Always learning.
All right, brother, you ready to take off? What do you say?
Yep. See ya.